I was having a panic attack in a room of 57 millionaires. Good thing my friend Michael was there. I grabbed Michael and I said, hey dude, I need some help. And 7 minutes later, not only was my panic attack gone, I felt better than I had felt in ages. See, Michael had studied this mystery man as well, but for different reasons. See, my motives for studying were selfish. I studied the world's greatest hypnotist to see if I could put people in a trance to buy my stuff. And what I discovered will shock you. In this video, you're gonna see 3 secrets that I teased out from over 1,000+ hours of studying, so you can skip the study and you can jump straight to the profits. Plus, these secrets will help you better serve your customers and may even improve other areas of your life beyond business. First though, who's the mystery man, and why did it take me thousands of hours to decode his secrets? Well, his name is Milton Erickson, and he ain't a business person. He didn't pursue wealth or fame. He was a medical doctor who later became a therapist and is credited with inventing conversational hypnosis. That's one reason his stuff is so hard to find and figure out how to use, because it wasn't designed to be used in business. Plus, Erickson was very cryptic. He didn't make it easy to figure out what he was doing. So I had to first study him, decrypt his techniques, rebuild them to try them in a business setting, test them out in the real world, see what happens, and then make adjustments. And what I discovered is most things that I tried, they didn't work, and I couldn't make them work even after repeated attempts. Only a few techniques worked, but those techniques worked so well they gave me a massive edge in business that helped me produce millions of dollars. While I can't teach you everything that I learned from Erickson in one YouTube video, I can give you 3 secrets that I gleaned from him that have had the most impact on my bank account and on bettering the lives of my customers. Let's go. Secret number 1, models of reality. There's a single question I can share with you that if you get it, will completely revolutionize your ability to influence and persuade. And it has to do with how we make decisions. And whether you realize it or not, there is a process for every single decision that you make. And if I can uncover how you make decisions, then guess what? I can help you make better decisions. And I want you to right now think about the difference between a territory and a map. The territory is exactly reality as it is, whereas the map is just a model of that reality. And a map does the same 3 things that we all do with information, which is we delete it, we distort it, and we generalize it. So a map may omit topographical details, for example, and it will distort the scale. It will turn miles down to inches. And it will generalize features for the sake of consistency at the cost of accuracy. And you do the same. With every decision you make, you have a map that you subconsciously consult with before making that decision. It is unlikely you even realize you do this because the speed of the mind is faster than the speed of light. Now, what I learned from Erickson is that if you want to help somebody to change their reality, you must first understand the reality as it currently is, regardless of how much or more likely how very little that reality actually makes sense. And what's also cool is using this model of reality technique is there is no deeper rapport that you can get than entering somebody's model of reality. And rapport is everything when it comes to selling and when it comes to coaching. So how do you do this then? Well, once I had a client who was afraid of public speaking. So I asked her, how do you know when to be afraid? And guess what? Nobody had ever asked her that before, which in itself is a lesson. Others had tried the already tested and obvious techniques, and if those were sufficient, then your clients wouldn't need you. You get paid the real big bucks on these edge cases. So she thought about this question, and at first she didn't know how to respond, so I prompted her. I said, listen, let's say we're at a table having dinner and you have 7 friends there, and then an 8th pulls up a chair. Is that now a public speaking situation, or are we still on a private dinner? And she mulled it over and she thought about it, and then she told me, she says, Jason, I get scared when I can no longer read the expression on every face in the audience. Interesting. And my response was like, yeah, of course. I'd be totally freaked out too. That sounds insane. That sounds overwhelming. And then I suggested, hey, is there other ways that you could feel safe when speaking in public without needing to rely on reading every face in the audience? And she took it home and she thought about it. And then several months later, she texted me of a pic of her looking like a boss, speaking at a huge event in front of hundreds and hundreds of people. So what do you say if you're selling and the person responds with, I need to think it over. Well, my favorite close is this. I say, that's great. How do you know when you've thought it over well enough to make the right decision? And with coaching clients, when we're working out their goals and their aspirations, how do you know when you've succeeded? Or if I sense a lack of confidence with a client, how do you know how much confidence you need to move forward? Is it 32.7% or is it more like 44.1%? And how will you know when you've reached that exact percentage that you need to feel confident? So the one single most powerful question that you can master is this: how do you know ... And I learned this from Erickson. And where I learned this was he had this client who was a compulsive nail biter who came to him once. It was a young kid. And Erickson looked at him and asked him, he said, how do you know which nail to bite first? And then he had another client who was afraid to be in a room unless the door was completely wide open. And he asked her, how do you know the difference between a door that is completely wide open versus one that is 1 millimeter shut? And this allows you to enter into somebody's model of reality. And this allows you to get that deep rapport. And you get it in seconds. And once you're in the interior of their mind, you can help them do some interior redecorating. And that becomes so much easier then to help somebody to change in the way that they want to change. Especially when you pair it with the second secret, which is called the power of utilization. Now, the best, worst way to change somebody is this massive action. I know, controversial, everybody says take massive action. The reason I said this is the best, worst way is because it works just enough so people think it's actually effective, but it usually isn't. You know, quitting cold turkey, going to the extreme, burning the bridges, no plan B, monk mode. These are all easy to understand concepts that occasionally rarely work, but because they're so dramatic in their implementation, people overvalue this approach as a strategy. Erickson had a much better, easier, and more consistent and effective way to change. And once I understood it, it made my sales, it made my coaching, it made my marketing, it made my personal development go through the roof. See, Erickson had a patient who was about 15 years old, and she was a thumb sucker. And she sucked her thumb everywhere, on the bus, at school, at home, and everybody hated it. So Erickson told the girl, he says, you're really wasting your opportunity here to really annoy your parents because of how you spread your thumb sucking around to everybody willy-nilly. He says, instead, what if you waited until after supper when your father liked to sit there, read his paper, then you could suck your thumb loudly and you could really annoy him. And he said, I've even gotten your father's permission that you can do this and he will not say a word about it. And she was to go get a clock and suck on her thumb to annoy him as much as possible for 20 minutes. And at school, she wasn't going to stop sucking her thumb, but she was going to concentrate sucking the thumb only in front of the particular boy or girl who she most disliked. And instead of doing it in front of every teacher, she was to only do it to the teacher who annoyed her the most. And the story goes that in less than a month, the girl gave up this thumb-sucking compulsion because it shifted from a compulsion into an obligation. See, Erickson saw every behavior any client demonstrated as this can be useful under the right circumstances, so how do we use it? And so once I did the same, man, business became so much easier for it. Because I love clients now who come to me and say, Jason, I got this problem, I procrastinate all the time. I say, fantastic, because procrastination is so wonderful under the right circumstances. So let's take this amazing, fantastic skill of procrastination that you have, and let's point it at something. Like maybe procrastinating on your excuses. Yeah, you can get around to making them later. And people think fear is bad. I think fear is so useful. I just have to make you more afraid of staying the same. And if I do that, then change becomes automatic. So for clients who have to be right all the time, which a lot of entrepreneurs are like this, I just find ways where they can prove me wrong and get a better result and then pay me more money. So Erickson showed me that where everyone else sees a problem, Erickson saw usefulness. The trick is to take the behavior or the belief that limits them now and make a slight change to it to make it useful, which then leads me to the third secret, breaking patterns. Most people are really great at losing weight, actually. It's just that they're even better at putting it back on. So they yo-yo. They go from keto to paleo to carnivore to intermittent fasting. They change the diet, but the pattern remains the same. Lose, then gain. Lose, then gain. So what would Erickson do? Well, he had a client once come to him who had gone through this lose then gain cycle. So he first made her gain 15 pounds now instead of losing weight. And she hated it. She cried, she begged, she pleaded, please let me lose weight, please let me lose weight. But he said he would not relent until she gained 15 pounds. So for the first time ever in her life, she struggled to gain weight. Never ever wanting to have to experiencing that pain again, she lost the weight this time and she kept it off once and for all. Erickson had another patient who flexed his forearms constantly. So they measured it, and what they discovered is it was almost exactly 135 times per minute that the patient flexed their forearms. So Erickson had him first increase it to 145 times. Then he had him go back down to 135. Then he had him go up to 150, and then down to 125. And then over a period of time, he had him change and modulate the range between 5 and 50 per minute. And then he shifted it to 25 times scattered throughout the day, and then over time between 5 to 35 times per week. And then he asked the client, hey, what day do you think is the first day where you will no longer have any more uncontrolled movements? Soon the client was lost of the compulsion. And Erickson tells the story, he goes, last I heard from this client, he was at a bakery working kneading dough, I guess putting those forearm muscles to good use. So this is breaking patterns. Sometimes I encounter clients who have already determined that they're going to fail before they even start. So instead of trying to convince them that they'll succeed, I help them find better ways to fail. So I had a client once that I could tell was putting too much pressure on himself to succeed. The pressure to succeed was so great, he wouldn't even follow through on anything, because if you don't put it out there, then you can't possibly fail. So I asked him this question. I said, how could you fail your way to $10,000 a month? And I said, well, $50,000 is too much. You're not ready to make that much right now. That's real success. You're not ready for it, but you know exactly how you can fail your way to $10,000 per month. And what's great about this is it removed the pressure. So it's actually much more likely that he'll make that $50,000, especially if he can prove me wrong. Erickson would always talk about how anybody could walk across a very thin board if it was 10 inches off the ground. But if you took that board and you placed it between two buildings 150 feet off the ground, all of a sudden you couldn't walk across that same board, and the reason is pressure. So when I give my clients permission to fail, I put them in a double bind. So if they fail, they still make more progress than they could before they were working with me. But if they fail to fail, like my client who made 50K when I told him he was only capable of 10, then they still make progress. I had a client once who came to me because he had a productivity issue, and he always ended his day feeling like there was more he could do and that he was always giving up too soon. And it's weird because this guy was super successful, but this just goes to show you how warped our own sense of self-worth can get. So I asked him, how do you know when you've worked too much? And at first he was confused. So then I prompted, I said, if you work till 10 p.m. that night, would that be too much? Or would you still feel unproductive? And he said, whoa, 10 p.m. is way too long because I start my day early, Jason. I started at 6. So I said, what about 8:47 p.m.? Is that still too much? What about 6:01? 5:47? 3:58? And he goes, whoa, hold on, stop. 3:58 would be too early. So I said 3:59, too early. 4 p.m., too early. 4:01. And as I say that, he cocks his head to the side, pauses, and thinks for a second. And then he says, 4:01 p.m. seems right. If I could just get to 4:01 p.m., I would know I was productive for that day. So then I asked him, okay, how long do you work right now? Till. And he says, 4 p.m. Huh. And I said, why 4 p.m.? He goes, my father says I must end the day at 4 p.m. on the dot. Aha! Now I figured it out. Final question I asked, would your father know if you stole back an extra minute for yourself? And he said, hey, I might even be able to get a few more than that. And now he'll feel productive. And if he feels productive, he'll become more productive. See, sometimes the difference between feeling good and feeling bad is a single minute or even a single second. We talked individuals here today in this video, but this works for markets too. What's the model of reality of the market that you serve? What are the behavior patterns that limit them from making progress? What's useful about those behavioral patterns? How can we break them? How can we make slight tweaks to those patterns to get better results? That, my friend, is the basis of every $1 million webinar that I've ever created. And speaking of webinars, if you'd like to know my 14-step webinar creation process, watch this next video wherever it shows up on YouTube.